This is the appointed time. We have a quorum. So let's start today's meeting. Let me welcome everyone to the open hearing of the Public Accounts Committee. We're going to hold a hearing on Chapter 3 of Report number 86, Management of Food Waste by the Environmental Protection Department. The witnesses attending today's hearing are Mr. Chair, Secretary for Environment and Ecology, Dr. Samuel Choi, Director of Environment Protection, and his team. So let's invite them to come in first.
Okay. 好，唔該晒我哋局長。
Right, let me welcome the Secretary, the Director, and his colleagues to our meeting. May I continue? Members, any declaration of interest in relation to this chapter? I need to declare that for the project Food Transmatter, the Hong Kong Productivity Council, and another private company are responsible for the manufacturing of the bins. So just to make a disclosure, let me ask Professor Nelson Lam, the Director of Audit, to make a start. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for inviting me to today's public hearing. Let me very quickly walk through Chapter 3 of Audit Report number 86, Management of Food Waste by the Environmental Protection Department. I'd like to sincerely thank the Environmental Protection Department for their full cooperation in supporting the work of the Audit Commission. There are 4 parts to this report. The first part is introduction. Lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets. Food waste is one of the major topics in environmental protection. In 2018, the government launched the pilot scheme on food waste collection service. Since 2021, the EPD has expanded the pilot scheme to provide point-to-point food waste collection services. In order to strengthen the support for the collection of food waste from domestic and C&I sectors, the EPD has gradually expanded the food waste recycling network covering PRH estates, private housing estates, buildings, villages, food waste producers of C&I sector, and public recycling points. In 2024-25, total operational expenses incurred for reduction and collection of food waste was $292 or so million. Now, our audit findings are set out in parts 2 to 4 of the report. Part 2 is management of food waste collection services. Part 3, provision of food waste recycling network, and Part 4, other related issues. In relation to the findings of the Audit Commission has made 40 recommendations to the EPD. And these recommendations are agreed by the Environmental and Ecology Bureau as well as the EPD. I'm very grateful for the support. Thank you. I will now invite the Secretary, Mr. Chair, to speak as well as the Director. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the Audit Commission for conducting a comprehensive review and audit on the management of food waste by the EPD. The audit has also offered valuable views to us. We accept the recommendations set out in the report, and we're actively following up on and implementing the relevant measures. In 2024, about 10,510 tons of municipal solid waste were sent to landfills on a daily basis, 30% of which were food waste. In order to realize the goal of zero carbon landfill for municipal solid waste by 2035, we have rolled out a series of measures. In relation to food waste management, we'll continue to enhance the food waste recycling network to support food waste collection in public and private premises. The collection points has substantially increased from less than 100 in 2021 to 1,600, covering about 70% of the domestic properties in Hong Kong. We'll continue to enhance the relevant food waste smart recycling bins and collection facilities in residential buildings, including increasing the number of bins in public rental housing in 2026 so as to reach the 1 bin per block initiative. We also have a number of initiatives such as the food waste charter and Foodwise Charter and Foodwise Hong Kong campaign and Big Waste, etc., so as to promote the culture of the Foodwise culture and encourage public participation. With continuous expansion of the recycling network, we are collecting more and more food waste through various channels. The amount has increased from 130 tons on a daily basis in 2021 to 390. That's about 200% increase. We'll continue to put in resources to improve the recycling network and adopt the Audit's recommendation to provide convenient services to the public. I will now invite the Director of Environmental Protection to give you details on the following up of the recommendations. Thank you. I thank the Audit Commission for providing invaluable recommendations on the collection and management of food waste by EPD, and the EPD is actively following up on and implementing the relevant measures. Now, on the management of food waste, as mentioned by the Secretary in his opening remarks, in the past few years we have achieved encouraging results in reducing the amount of food waste and increasing food waste recycled. In order to realize the goal of zero carbon landfill, we will continue to expand the food waste recycling network to further enhance our recycling capacity. We'll also enhance public education publicity on separation of food waste and recycling. We'll also require the service provider to adopt suitable measures to screen inert materials in food waste so as to continue to enhance the quality and quantity of food waste collected. Now, on management, the EPD has drawn up guidelines on the monitoring of food waste collection. The guidelines set out very clearly the inspection criteria, procedures, assessment for non-compliance, and follow-up procedures on late submissions of reports. On tendering exercises, the EPD has enhanced the mechanism for vetting tenders. We've also introduced artificial intelligence to help review the tender documents to ensure that the tendering exercise is in line with the government's procurement guidelines. The EPD is also reviewing and enhancing the pre-tender estimate formation methodology so as to provide more accurate estimates in future tender exercises. The EPD will also review the existing assessment criteria and suitably relax the restriction rule on approving food waste collection contracts so as to strike a balance between the delivery of public service and cost effectiveness. We've also stepped up monitoring of the relevant contracts so as to plan for the follow-on contracts as soon as possible and avoid extension of contracts. On setting up food waste collection network, the EPD has expedited its progress in procuring smart bins for public rental housing to ensure that by the end of 2026 there will be sufficient bins to realize the goal of 1 bin per block. The EPD will also continue to promote the installation of food waste collection smart bins in private housing estates. There will be enhanced technical support for these housing estates and also application guidelines to expedite the vetting procedures. The EPD has also completed a series of tasks on enhancing the food waste collection smart bins. In 2025, despite a substantial increase in the number of bins in public rental housing, the monthly normal operating hours remained on average at 99.5%. And that shows the food waste smart recycling bins are operating at are performing quite well, and the service hours can be maintained at a very high level. We'll continue to monitor the operating situation. We'll also ask contractors to submit reports to enhance service quality. We'll introduce an electronic information management system, as well as setting up a consolidated waste management information system to enhance the efficiency of collection, management, and analysis of data. This can help us monitor the operation of bins and the performance of service contractors. On food waste reduction, through FoodWise campaign, the EPD will continue to promote the FoodWise culture. We'll also encourage and assist signees of FoodWise Charter by demanding regular reports from them. We've also set up a new committee called Promotion or Big Waster Promotion Committee under the steering committee to set up quantifiable KPIs to gauge the effectiveness of the FoodWise campaign Hong Kong. We'll continue to actively follow up on the various recommendations in the report to enhance the performance of food waste management. Right, we'll start the Q&A session now, and as discussed, we're going to combine parts 1 and 2. When we start, Mr. Jonathan Leung will be the leading member. He will ask questions first. He will spend 20 minutes, question and answer included. Other members may also take turns to ask questions. Each member will have 15 minutes, question and answer included. Those who are interested to speak, please press the request to speak button in front of you. Mr. Jonathan Leung. Well, this is a chapter on the management of food waste. It's closely related to the F&B sector, which I represent. We have close to 10,000 tons of municipal solid waste, or MSW, sent to landfill every day. 30% of that is food waste, and that's a big portion. So we need to solve some core problems. We need to ease the pressure of the landfills. The government rolled out a series of waste reduction activities, and that for OPA 1 and OPA 2, that they entailed billions of dollars, but we do not have performance indicators to gauge the effectiveness. The recovery rate is less than 10%, and the amount sent to the Organic Resources Recovery Center is far lower than its capacity of 600 tons. I thank the audit for making recommendations. I hope that the government will continue to improve its work on the collection of domestic and C&I sector food waste to ease the pressure of landfill. Now, my question is this. According to paragraph 2.6a of the audit report, the food waste collected increased from 22,931 tons in 2024 to 44,729 tons in 2025, up by 95%. But at the same time, the amount from C&I sector only increased by 11%. Can you tell us the reason why? Has it to do with the government's efforts in promoting the recycling facilities? And can you account for the difference between the food waste collected from C&I sector and the domestic sector? And can you tell us whether the government will do more to promote food waste collection among the C&I sector? Director. Thank you, Chair. Since 2021, the EPD rolled out a pilot scheme. Initially, we sought to provide point-to-point food waste collection services for C&I sector, in which a lot of food waste was generated, and that accounted for the increase in 2021-2022. For domestic properties, we only expanded the network in 2023. In fact, recently, as you have seen, we have installed smart bins in private and public housing estates, especially for public rental housing. All estates are now equipped with the food waste smart recycling bins. We also have different schemes to enhance the number of bins installed at private housing estates. So that accounts for the substantial increase in the amount of food waste collected from domestic properties in 2024-2025. For the C&I sector, in fact, the amount increased quite substantially starting from 2021. In 2025, in fact, food waste collected from domestic properties increased more substantially than that from C&I sector because of the sequence of the two schemes. Now, for C&I sector food waste, we have actually made a lot of efforts. For example, at different locations, we have set up the point-to-point food waste collection services. We also have street collection points for collecting food waste from C&I sector. Overall speaking, the operation is smooth. Thank you, Chair. Well, is it that we need more food waste collection points in order to enhance the amount of food waste collected? Right, for 3,000 tons of food waste collected every day, only 275 tons every day were recovered. That's less than 10%. And for the utilization rate of the facilities, just 58%. According to paragraphs 2.2, 2.6, and 2.27 of the audit report, the EPD will continue to enhance the amount of food waste collected. Can you tell us what measures will be adopted and what will be done to enhance the utilization rate of the facilities? And how would you gauge the performance? I'll ask the Deputy Director to answer this question. Thank you, Chair. In relation to the food waste collection that the member mentioned, that's the figure in 2024. As we mentioned in the opening remarks, the latest collection amount now stands at 390 tons. Now, comparing to the food waste generated every day, there is a lot of room for improvement, we agree. And that is why we'll continue to expand our food waste recycling network. As mentioned by the Director, the scheme for domestic food waste started later than that for the C&I sector. And that is why, on expanding the network for collecting domestic food waste, we will step up our efforts. Now, for example, in each PRH estate, we have installed a food waste smart recycling bin. We want to achieve 1 bin per block by the end of this year. This will help enhance public participation rate. For private housing estates, we will continue to dispatch smart bins to more housing estates. Under the Environmental Campaign Committee scheme, we adopted a higher threshold, and that is 1,000 households per housing estates. In fact, in last October, we lowered the threshold to just 200 households with a view to attracting more small to medium-sized estates to join us. By doing so, we can expand the recycling network and make it more convenient for the public. We'll also step up public education and publicity so as to enhance public participation, and we believe this will give a boost to the amount of food waste collected.
Yeah.
Chair, Mr. Jonathan Leung. Let's get to the issue of inert materials. According to 2.9a of the report, we have in O Park 1 the waste received at the facility that included inert materials such as plastic cutlery, packaging materials, and the weight has increased from 13% in 2021 to 29% in March 2025. Why is there such a significant increase? I also want to ask, we have some larger inert materials collected as well, such as broken plastic chairs and phone boxes. It should be easy to detect by the naked eye. For the smaller inert materials, how can you detect them effectively? Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair. As I explained earlier, we started with food waste in the commercial and industrial sectors. The characteristic is they have relatively similar food waste, so it's easier to control the non-food waste material content. So it was just 10% before the proportion of inert materials. In 2024 and 2025, we have increased collection of food waste from households. When people cook at home, for example, if they make soup, they will have bones in the soup. And some citizens express that because they want to have a cleaner environment, they would put the food waste in plastic bags and then put the bags in the recycling bins. With this, we do see a higher proportion of inert materials. At the beginning, we asked residents to not dispose of such inert materials. But because people were still adjusting, we thought more time was needed to lower the ratio of inert materials. We will, however, continue to educate the public on this. On 2.9b, we do have some larger inert materials found. They were mainly found at the beginning in 2023. At the time, the bins were for the collection of food waste of the commercial and industrial sectors. And we were using larger bins that were 660 liters in size. So if people deposit larger inert materials at the bottom and people deposit food waste on top of that, the contractors can't really find in advance there are the larger inert materials. When we found this to be the case, we alerted contractors to the issue and we saw an improvement in the situation. In 2023, we found 5 cases of such. In 2024, there was only 1 case, and there was also 1 case in 2025. We followed up on every one of these instances. Recently, we have implemented further improvement measures. Before, bins were green, and we would use the same bins for general waste. Recently, we have put in place purple bins so that the commercial and industrial sectors know the difference between the bins. We found this to be quite effective. So people now know these are food waste bins. We will continue to work on public education and publicity. We have also introduced new arrangements. We now give staff members metal detectors to detect metal items in bins and collect them and take them out. We see an improvement. Mr. Jonathan Lowe. Thank you. Why didn't the EPD penalize the relevant contractors, though? No deductions were made from the monthly operation fees. The inert materials were not included in the calculation of food waste collected, but I want to ask, after all, these materials may be toxic. How much of an impact there is if they are indeed sent to the O parts? Director, we would remove the materials and the operators would have to remove the waste. So they, in the end, contractors will not include the amount of waste in the amount of food waste collected, As for the food waste processing facilities, after they have filtered out the inert materials, they will not count such materials in the amount of food waste processed in the charging fees. So it will not incur additional costs, basically, with such inert materials sent to facilities. But of course, we want to have cleaner recycling, which is why we will enhance education, and we have directed contractors to note these instances. Mr. Jonathan Leung. Alright, I want to follow up on the suspected non-compliance cases. According to paragraph 2.12, it talks about how contractor F has 2 suspected incompliances. There was a delay and there were some cleansing issues. And these issues were recorded in the half-yearly contractor's performance reports. But there's no documentary evidence showing that the EPD regarded these suspected non-compliance cases as non-compliance events. No deductions were made to the monthly contractor's performance or monthly operation fees. So I think there is unclear guidance on deduction of monthly operation fees. The Audit Commission recommended promulgating guidelines to make assessments and determine which cases should be seen as non-compliance events and when deductions to monthly operation fees are made. And can you tell us what have you done in improvement of these issues? Mr. Kenneth Ching. Thank you, Chair. In the audit report, it mentioned 2 cases, and we looked at the 2 cases. In the cases, residents complained. For one case, the contractor was late, and in another case, there is room for improvement in gift redemption arrangements. After finding out more about the cases, we have notified the contractors of the issues, and the contractor has implemented improvement measures. As for whether deductions should be made to monthly operation fees, we refer to the contract, and we need to have regard to the actual circumstances. We did note the complaint, and we recorded the complaint, but then it was actually due to adverse weather conditions, or there was traffic congestion. we reviewed the actual circumstances and decided not to make deductions. We did note the Audit Commission's comment that we should clearly record justifications for not making deductions in future that can be of reference. There was another case that involved food waste recycling at a hospital. The bin at the hospital was not cleaned thoroughly. We did investigate. The contractor followed routine procedures for cleansing, but the hospital had more stringent requirements for cleansing. So we did record this issue, but because this was a specific requirement, we don't think that non-compliance warrants deduction to monthly operation fee, but we agree with what the Audit Commission said. We should record the reasons for penalizing contractors or not penalizing contractors. I hope that there will be specific guidelines and clear records reflecting the circumstances. Let's move on to the following section. We do note that EPD officers would conduct on-site inspections. It seems that the aims and scopes of inspections varied between teams. According to paragraph 2.17, Audit Commission examined inspection checklists of inspections conducted in October 2025, 247 of them, 35% of the inspections. The food waste collection process was not observed by EPD staff in 74 of the 86 inspections, and for the remaining 161 inspections, food waste collection process was not observed by EPD staff in 42 inspections. So the EPD said they would promulgate guidelines for on-site inspection criteria for the reference of EPD staff. How can the EPD ensure officers are familiar with the guidelines and have a comprehensive How can we have a comprehensive understanding of the service performance of contractors? Director: thank you, Chair. For every officer conducting an inspection, they will have a form for inspection, and they will fill out the form according to what they see. Our officers look at multiple things during inspections. They will observe the process of food waste collection to see whether the contractor is doing good work and whether citizens are using the bins appropriately. We also need to monitor the operations of the smart recycling bins to make sure they are working in good order. When our officers conduct inspections, they will try to look at all these areas if possible. But to observe the collection process, they need to match the collection schedule of the contractors. So sometimes officers will just look at food waste collection at smart recycling bins, how citizens are using bins. Indeed, in our guidelines, we did not specify to officers there are such guidelines. It is because at the beginning, officers would just fill out the specific forms for inspections. We did note the Audit Commission's report's recommendations, so we have now additional guidelines. Officers would record in advance before the inspections what they plan to do for each inspection. And for the two cases the member mentioned, we were looking at operations of smart recycling bins for inspections to observe food waste collection process. We would have a different approach. For individual inspections, we may have different aims of the inspections. They differ slightly, at least. We know the Audit Commission's recommendation. We have prepared guidelines for officers' reference, and we can perhaps provide more comprehensive information in future. Sorry, I have one more question. According to paragraph 2.21, between May 2023 and October 2025, the contractors were late in submitting certain deliverables. For the 132 reports, 89 of them were submitted late 1 to 66 days, and for the annual reports, 4 out of the 8 were submitted late by 9 to 28 days. Did you take any follow-up action with the contractors on the issue? Mr. Kenneth Ching. Thank you, Chair. These contractors have to submit monthly deliverables, basically summarizing how much food waste they collected in the past month, where they collected the food waste, whether they dealt with complaints. So monthly, they need to provide some information to us. Sometimes it took time to verify the information or processing of papers. The deliverables were submitted late. We do know this is not ideal. Now, for the monthly deliverables, if contractors do not submit the deliverables to us for the month, we will not release the monthly operation fee to them. So basically, contractors have the incentive to submit deliverables as soon as possible. We do know some contractors who do not need the funds urgently, so they submitted the deliverables late. We note the Audit Commission's recommendation for deliverables or reports to be submitted by contractors. We would urge contractors to submit the papers in time. It is also beneficial for their cash flows. We are also reviewing whether we can automate certain submissions of reports, or at least try to make things smarter so as to reduce the time and manpower resources needed for the submission of such documents. Sorry, I have further follow-up questions. What do you mean by verification of information? Is it because you need the time for verification, or is it contractors? If they do not submit deliverables, they will not receive the fees. But this is not the policy intent. Even if they don't need the funds, we need them to submit the relevant documents in time. Mr. Kenneth Ching. Thank you, Chair. Understood. Well, the contractors did not submit the reports in time. When I talked about verification of information, I'm talking about within the contractors, with larger contractors, they needed time for clearance because there are different tiers in companies. Of course, it is not ideal that when companies don't need the funds, they submit the deliverables late. So we now repeatedly remind contractors to do this as soon as possible. All right, I'll let other members ask questions. Mr. Vincent Ching.
多謝主席。
I've got 15 minutes. Yeah, that's the guideline. I'd like to follow up on what Jonathan asked about. That is to increase collection volume of waste from C&I sectors. I think on the whole, more waste have been collected and more people are willing to take part. But how can we further enhance collection from the C&I sector? That's important. I think that many eateries have got lots of food waste. Even when you go to the Shamshipo market, I think there are people who like to collect food waste voluntarily. So that's quite an amount. In the report, 1.5D C&D talks about food waste producers of C&I sector and public recycling points. And then further to your website on recycling scheme. I think, well, if I'm wrong, please correct me. That is for operators of eateries in shopping malls. They can join your pilot scheme on food waste collection scheme, or for the public, they can take the waste to the recycling points or recycling spots. Okay, on point-to-point waste collection services. On your website, it stated that in a particular mall, say if you're running a restaurant, if you're registered at the mall for the pilot scheme, then you can have your food waste recycled. And then here on this website, for the 18 districts, there is this information on where recycling collections is available. And then from Shamshipo, Yaochimong district, well, numbers limited. In Yaochimong, in some big shopping malls, or Miramar, or Olympian Mall, and so forth, they're willing to contribute. And yet, like Harbour Center or Harbour City, that is not covered in Shamshipo. Only 4 and 5 malls are involved, but the West Kowloon Center is not included. So these are big shopping malls which are not listed in your plan. So for your pilot scheme, is it up to the shopping malls to take the initiative to join, to come to you, to approach you, to sign a form, to register, or what? For large shopping malls, they should actually indeed be contacted by your staff instead, and you should take the initiative to contact those large shopping malls so that the restaurants or shops there can be involved in the scheme. Deputy Director, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cheng, for your question. I think you are to the point in that in the C&I sector, how we can have more premises in the sector to join our food waste collection scheme. As you said, as long as they're willing to take part, we will go and collect the waste. So all along, we've been trying hard to involve more premises in large shopping malls in particular, or hotels, to join our scheme. Quite a number of shopping malls, as you can see from the website, have already joined. And yet, there's still a number of shopping centers which have not done so. We're just not sitting here waiting for them. From time to time, we would contact the management companies or the developers running these centers. I've met with them several times, and each time I discussed the scheme with them. For each case, I try to understand their hard points. Often they say it's due to their location or their concern about hygiene. Say for some premises or operators, if they take the waste to the collection points, would that deter visitors and so forth? So I will also share successful experiences with them to try to address their concerns. And at the same time, we do hope that at the community level, electrical members or other community figures can take part in encouraging the operators to take part. We will step up our work. I understand. By looking at the effectiveness, I'm sure you have achieved results because some large shopping malls are involved. But your scheme has been running for some time. Are there any other KPIs to show that as long as your staff come up with ways to approach them? For example, Harbour City, for example, is such a big mall. Why is it unwilling to join your scheme? Are there any core issues that are unresolved? Would you consider providing more incentives to these large shopping malls, for example, allocate more resources to them? How can you actually achieve better KPIs? Because just for the look at the website, like in Kowloon City, where Festival Harbour Kai Tak Sports Park, have you done any discussions with them, with Kai Tak Sports Park? I did talk to individual shopping malls. Kai Tak Sports Park, for example, they say that they have their own composter already, so they can tackle their food sources on the spot, food waste on the spot. But for other malls, we need to try various ways. Going forward, in our food-wise steering committee, we have established with the sector a working group on accelerating food waste recycling, and we will focus on how to collaborate with the C&I sector, so that for those shopping malls that have not joined the scheme, to help them tackle the issues or encourage them to join our scheme. So we need to do it step by step. I hope that you can continue to encourage involvement. I believe that at shopping malls, they would have a large amount of food waste, particularly those with a large number of eateries. And also for the public food waste recycling points, Mr. Vincent Cheng, can you focus on the same point? It is related, is from 1.5D, public recycling points. That is collection of food waste from nearby eateries and residential premises. There are 110 recycling points. So what is their coverage? Is it the maximum number of recycling points you can offer? Are you having any index or indicators? I've asked the eateries at Fort Wayne Street, asked them whether they have collected food waste. They said they just put it in the rubbish bins. So how can you encourage eateries? They have the cost concern, right? They may need time to take the food waste to the recycling points, but how can you encourage them to really get involved so that they have a habit of not throwing the food waste into rubbish bins, but take them to the recycling points? Have you got any indicators and so forth? Deputy Director, I think at the public recycling points right now, all the facilities available for collecting food waste, whenever they are possible, we have placed them at the designated spots. For collection of food waste, particularly from smaller street-level eateries, the challenge is that it's not so much how many points you install, but as Mr. Chen said, how the shop owners are willing to walk to the collection points. So getting them involved is the most important. So besides collecting, we have dispatched staff to do publicity work. That is, we will have contact with the eateries near the collection points or recycling points. So besides rubbish bins, we also have recycling spots. So once we set up a recycling spot on the night, we don't have just staff waiting for people to come, but we will visit. We have staff visiting individual shop operators, reminding them of the recycling spot and encourage them to take the food waste there. So we will try to have as much contact with the operators as possible to encourage them to take part. Because often these street level eateries tend to be small and they are concerned about doing more business as much as they can. So we will step up our publicity work and to make it more convenient for them. Yeah, so that leads to another question. Do you have a target KPI? Because food waste collection has been going on for some time. At shopping malls, you can have the indicator of which eateries, which restaurants have recycled their food waste. But can you start maybe with restaurant chains, or you have different funds and you can make use of the fund to encourage all the small eateries to get involved in the food waste recycling scheme and then give the best performers an award at the end of the scheme. So if an eatery has over a period of 10 years has not yet taken part, then you need to try to find ways to help them change their mind. So you need to make effort. I know that it's difficult running an eatery, but how can you try to think of ways to encourage such eateries to get involved? Yes, we will continue to do our work. And again, we need to join hands with the sector because the sector itself knows the best what's the situation in the sector and what they can do, what more steps they can take to encourage small eatery operators to, rather than throwing the food waste into rubbish bin, but take the trip to take the waste to the recycling points. And also we need to make it more convenient for the operators, considering their own business models. Okay, my next question is about 2.9. That's part 2. That is the auditor noticed that from September to October, if there are some inert materials like broken plastic materials or boxes in the food waste, that's what the small eateries are most concerned about, where they need to sort the food waste for you. And you said that there are guidelines provided which are under or being improved on. So for the eatery operators which have taken food waste to the recycling facilities and yet inert materials are discovered there, maybe just a few plastic forks, then what would you do? How would you encourage them not to be deterred by the possibility of having to deal with inert materials? Director, well, we have published some leaflets and our staff are on hand to explain the process to the eateries. That is to tell the operators that when they gather the food waste, how they can deal with the inert materials to separate them from the overall food waste. So that is actually more to do with the habit in running an eatery. But I know in Hong Kong, local eateries tend to be small and their kitchen is small, so it could be difficult for them to do 100% work in dealing with inert materials or in sorting. So we are having a flexible arrangement. In sorting, we will try to help them how to do it. And early on, we also carry out workshops and also organize activities for the sector to promote sorting, the proper way to sort. And it's, well, if there are cases where the eateries have not done a proper job, then we will never penalize them. All along, we have tried to carry out education and encouragement to get them to do the sorting properly. So in terms of our food waste recycling facilities, even though there are inert materials and the number of inert materials found has increased, but we still focus on education more. And even with the rising volume of food waste, in terms of our food waste treatment facilities, there hasn't been a big impact because in dealing with food waste, we are able to actually take out the inert materials. So therefore, on the whole, there has been improvement made. Okay, I think that's about it for me for part 1, but on the whole, I feel that you have made progress in collecting food waste, but particularly in relation to eateries and shopping centers, I suggest that you can set indicators. I think Mr. Leung is more familiar with it. For eatery operators, it's not difficult for them to run their business because their operating costs are quite high. We should not keep adding to the workload, but we need to see what problems they occur in dealing with food waste. You can also provide them with more incentives so as to make them more willing to contribute. We discussed before about the recycling of food waste from eateries. That's a challenge to the sector, but looking at the details now, I know you have done various tasks, whether for small eateries or shopping malls or public recycling points. I know, but still, there's room for improvement, I think. Thank you. Next one is Lee Kwang Yu. 2.30 in paragraph A, it says that the EPD's tender assessment panel stuck to the wrong marking scheme. Why did that happen? In Financial Circular /2019, the wage should not make more than or occupy less than 25% of the overall assessment in criteria. But why did the case happen? And the director said that going forward you will use AI to help you carry out the verification work. So what sort of AI tool have you used to carry out your assessment? What is the result? Are you still using paper form assessment, or now you are doing a paperless approach because now you're using AI? So you need to you can collect data through AI. So it should be an online format, but it's contradictory. You use paper format and yet you want to reduce waste. So you're generating waste. So on the verification work, what improvement measures have you undertaken and what's the result? Thank you, Chairman. Director. We've noticed that in the incident, staff had committed some clerical errors and wrongly used the 18% as the figure. But during the tendering process, we found that we needed to carry out immediate measures to deal with it. And we went back to report the case to the Central Tendering Board, and also to the tenderers. We told them that we amended the data concerned, and then before we carry out the assessment. So on the whole, the tender exercise was delayed by 4 months, so we learned a lesson. At EPD last year, in the second half of last year, we began actually a new an experiment that is for the whole of the government. It's the first time by a department to use AI in dealing with tendering work. So we had to actually in relation to the guidelines for tendering within the government. It's like a library. We had to create a data system, and then on the basis of that, all the information will go into an AI system, which will automatically choose and compare the various guidelines or the data concerned according to the guidelines, and it's an automatic system, and so it's running like a library, and that will allow us to do comparisons in accordance with the guidelines. And we also use pre-existing successful cases and train the AI with those successful cases. So now 6 months have passed since we adopted the new system, and slowly we are training the AI system. And recently, For various tendering exercises, we've used this new system for experimental purpose. So right now, on the whole, I think we can use the system, and when we use it, we will first of all apply it in large-scale engineering projects first. Slowly, we will apply it to daily projects, and for the purpose of training our model, big model. And also with other government departments, we have shared our experience in using the AI model, and we'll continue to complete our work. Now we're still on a trial phase in terms of using the system.
局長，我唔
Well, I don't quite understand, Secretary. You mentioned AI, and in fact, we can apply AI to everything, but I'm asking something very simple. I don't know why we need to use AI because we're just talking about crunching numbers. And also, for the form, are we talking about a paper-based form or are we talking about online forms? Because otherwise, if you use paper-based form and then apply AI, I think that these two will be in conflict. So I don't quite understand because you mentioned using AI to check numbers. Can you tell us more? Thank you, Chair. Let me supplement. AI doesn't just check numbers. In fact, there are a lot of requirements in the tender document. We need to check, for example, whether these requirements are met, be it public works projects or otherwise. Let me give you an example. There may be safety requirements. There may be some specific design requirements or wages when it comes to staff. So it's akin to a big library. In the tender brief, we impose a lot of requirements. Say in paper form, we're talking about the size of 3 to 4 books. The next thing is that we need to check paragraphing. We need to check if there are errors. Now all these can be done by AI. And we no longer adopt paper-based approach. The forms are available online. But of course, if checks are to be done via naked eye, then there may be some printing involved. But now we've migrated from a paper-based approach. Well, it may not have to do with the director, but please make sure that your staff will not use the excuse of using AI. And also about paragraph 2.17, as mentioned by Mr. Jonathan Leung, in October, you conducted 247 routine inspections. Now, after the inspections, forms would have to be filled out. I want to know if the forms are, again, paper-based, because when it comes to a systematic management, you need to have systematic management for routine inspections conducted by the EPD as well. Now, this is already applied in booking illegal parking. The police would take pictures immediately. So would you do the same for the purpose of analysis? Because if you do not adopt this systematic approach, how do you make sure that everything included in the 1,000 odd pages of forms will be checked? Because if you do not take a systemic approach in assessing and analyzing data, there will be problems with daily management. Now I'll give the floor to the director, the deputy director. Now my answer to the member's question is this. About the smart recycling bins, there is a platform operating at the back to check the daily operation. We check the big data to see if there are any operational issues day in, day out, and whether there is any malfunctioning involved. As for our routine inspection at the moment, we rely on paper forms. But in the long run, we will take on board the members' suggestion, and that is we will go digital and make sure that everything is stored in the computer system or at least on an iPad. In fact, during the inspections, our staff will take pictures, and the pictures will also be stored in our big database so as to help us check these collection points and see whether there are problems and whether follow-up action is needed. Everything is stored in the database, and in the future we will go digital to make sure that after the routine inspections, our staff will not need to manually put in information in the computer system. Any follow-up? No? Mr. Webster, next member. I'd like to go to paragraph 2.32 and 33, and also in the executive summary, paragraph 8. That's about some financial information. About tender exercise 5. For the winning bidder, the price offer was 43 to 69% lower than the estimate. So that's a big gap. According to a reply in paragraph 2.33, the EPD did not share the tender assessment criteria during the market sounding exercise, and that's technical price ratio 50-50, which differed from the previous tenders of 60-40. This might have led to higher price quotes from potential tenderers. Now I'm perplexed. First, you did not share the tender assessment criteria, and then that led to higher price quotes from potential tenderers. That's higher than the budget. I don't understand the causal link. Is it something that you guessed? How did not sharing the tender assessment criteria affect the quotes? Please explain that. The next point is this. Now, there is such a big difference between the estimates and the bids received, and that's a 40 to 70% difference. Can you come up with a way to make sure that these two figures will have a narrower gap in the future? Say by conducting research. Say if you say that the price rate, the assessment criteria has changed from 60-40 to 50-50, then will you consider allowing the bidders to have more information so as to make sure the bids will not depart from the estimates too much? Director, for the tender exercise, we also strive to find ways to lower the price as much as possible. That is, every time we adopted steps to achieve that. We conducted, for example, the market sounding exercise to see what was on offer, and we also asked roughly what quotes would be provided in the tendering exercise so that the offering bids would be lower. So that's the work we do before we roll out the tendering exercise formally. After the market sounding exercise, we would have an idea in mind. Now, initially, we adopted this ratio that's technical to pricing ratio of 60 to 40. And upon assessment, we were of the view that this ratio could be adjusted, so it became 50-50 instead. In the market sounding exercise, we had not made this adjustment. And then upon the tendering exercise, the bidders understood the change, and that is why they have been more prudent in placing bids. We conducted market sounding exercises, and then when there were more and more bidders, they would come up with their ways to lower the cost so that they could submit lower bids. In fact, the price is on a drop. So despite the pre-tender estimates not being ideal on the whole, the bids submitted are now lower, and that's good for the government. And we are of the view that in the future, when we conduct market sounding exercises, we will step up communication with the contractors or the bidders so that we'll be able to get more competitive bids and more accurate estimates. And we'll continue to do that. Mr. Ng, one follow-up question. I'm looking at page 22 and footnote 23. In 2021, the technical pricing ratio of 60-40 was adopted. I want to know when it changed to 50-50. Thank you, Chair. From a weight of 60-40 to 50-50, all right, let me correct. About this ratio, 50-50, it's because we did not receive very good bids when we adopted 60-40, and that's why we later changed to 50-50 so as to encourage more competitive bids. And that's why we conducted a review and immediately adopted the new ratio. I think it was around 2024. I need to check, I'm sorry. Now, Chairman, I ask this question because, as I understand, this ratio should not be casually changed and often changed, because according to footnote 23 about this ratio of 60-40, this was first adopted in 2021. That's in paragraph 2.30. And then your colleague mentioned it happened just 1 or 2 years ago. Now, this ratio should not be changed too frequently. And as you mentioned, it seems that this review was conducted once 3 or 4 or 5 years. So I hope that in the future, this factor would be taken into account in a future budgeting exercise. Director, thank you. In fact, it was in 2025 that we changed to this ratio. Indeed, we do not arbitrarily change this ratio. It should come with supporting data. And And after we have a better idea of the market situation and the technology, we would then consider adjusting this ratio. And that happened in 2025. We accumulated experience, and then we decided to change the ratio from 60-40 to 50-50. Right, another question, paragraph 2.35 and 2.36 of the audit report. It is said that restriction rule was applied to the tendering exercise, and if my understanding is correct, tendering exercises 4 and 5 were affected as a result. Because of the restriction rule, the total tender price increased by 19%, and that's by $31.9 million. I don't know in actual operation at which stage you imposed the restriction rule and on what grounds. That's the first question. Second question, after imposing the restriction rule, did you envisage an increase in the total tender price, and would that affect how public money was used? And how do you gauge the cost effectiveness? You spent more public money indeed, but have you conducted any assessment to make sure it's cost effective? And that is good to have imposed the restriction rule. Please explain for the benefit of the public. Secretary or Director. Thank you, Chair. In 2022, we followed the criteria adopted for financial reports. Now, in 2022, the market was just getting mature. It was up and running, and we wanted to encourage more market participants so that with more competitive bids, the operating cost can be lowered in the future. At the same time, if one service provider became the collector of a number of contracts, there could be market dominance. And this may be counterintuitive to market development in the future. So, our initial consideration was to prevent one contractor from taking up all the work. Now, our second goal is that as far as food waste collection was concerned, we're at the teething stage. So, market-wise, we were not sure if the contractor would be able to comply with all our requirements. So, to play safe, if we have a number of market participants signing up, and that if one company failed, we could replace it with another company. So that's why we impose this restriction rule, and that the contractor would be barred from taking up too many food waste collection projects. But in hindsight, considering only that particular tendering exercise, indeed, there have been an increase in public spending. But the good thing it brought about was that there'd be more market competition, and then in the long run, with market competition and a more vibrant scene, the bids will be lowered. Now, considering the audit's recommendation, we fully agree that we should think carefully whether we should continue to uphold this restriction rule. So in the future, when we hold tendering exercises, we will not impose the restriction rule to stop one company from bidding for multiple contracts. However, we do not want market dominance, and that is why we will keep things flexible. Say, if there are altogether 3 to 4 contracts in Hong Kong, then in the tendering exercise, we will still not allow a single bidder to take up all the 3 or 4 contracts. We'll consider the matter thoroughly before deciding the way forward. But we're not going to restrict one contractor per contract.
I have a follow-up question, Chair. I want to refer to paragraph 2.24. So basically, the EPD will look at the contractor's performance reports. The contractor submitted the reports late, on average 128 days, but the maximum is 583 days or 593 days. So that is over 1.5 years. The department doesn't want there to be a single company in the market. If the company is submitting the report so late, would it affect subsequent arrangements with the contractors for the department? Mr. Kenneth Ching. Thank you, Chair. We do admit there is a delay with the submission of contractors' performance reports. When we saw rapid expansion of the food waste recycling network, the team was quite busy. Evaluation was done a little slower than expected. We pledge to improve this. The team will follow up on this in future and make sure contractors' performance reports are submitted on time. Thank you, Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Chair. I want to follow up on what Mr. Jonathan Leung said about paragraph 2.6a, food waste for households and food waste from the commercial industrial sectors. In 2024, every day we have 10,510 tons of municipal solid waste sent to the landfills. Food waste takes up a high proportion of the waste. If we manage food waste well, we will achieve zero landfill by 2035, the goal. We do see a significant increase in the waste collected from households, 90%, 95%. Now, in 2025, the food waste collected from the commercial industrial sectors and from households, if we look at the percentage, if we consider the total amount for the whole year being 1.1 million, it's just 10%. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Say for the commercial and industrial sectors, it's approximately 5%. For domestic food waste, it's approximately 4%. Of course, you still have 9 years to achieve the goal, but we need to move fast. We do see an increase in the amount of food waste collected from the commercial and industrial sectors being 11%. And I understand from 2021 to 2025, the arrangements were still developing. But I think later on it will be even harder for you because there is this plateau period when people have already done the easy things. You try to encourage people to do things. If they wanted to, they would have already done it. If there are not a lot of additional incentives, the others may not want to participate. So the goal is to achieve zero landfill in 2035. It seems that we still have a large gap. How can we make sure in this marathon you can meet the milestones for each stage? And do you expect it to get more difficult in future, or is it that later on you will put in place more incentives and you expect a significant increase in the amount of food waste collected? Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Kenneth Ching. Thank you, Chair. Right now, with the goal of zero landfill by 2035, it's not just about food waste. We are doing that for different categories of waste. We do see a significant increase in the food waste collected. It is very encouraging. It does come from a relatively small base, and we've seen rapid growth so far. Whether it will become slower, we think compared to the amount of food waste produced at the moment, there is much room for improvement. What we'll do is first expand the recycling network to make it easier for everyone to recycle food waste. And that's why we've been advocating for one bin per block, because sometimes when it is convenient, people would more likely deposit food waste. For example, when a bin is available on the ground floor of the building instead of on another block. We also want to make good use of our smart system. We are providing green dollar incentives for citizens' participation. For the commercial and industrial sectors, as said earlier, we believe there is room for the sectors to do more, and we do want to encourage them to do more. With a larger base, it is going to be more challenging for us, but we do still see room for improvement, and we are just doing things step by step. Thank you. Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you. I would now like to follow up on paragraphs 2.37 and 2.38. The need to improve the planning of tendering schedule and expedite tendering exercises. The Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau, in principle, said contract extension should be avoided as far as possible and normally be used as a stopgap measure. Now, the EPD said in the paper they needed additional time for finalizing the follow-on agreements, so they issued variations of orders so that 4 contracts were extended for 3 to 6 months. In June 2023, as well as in December 2023, the EPD sought approval of the FSTB for the extension of the contract periods. Now, in July 2023 and January 2024, the contract extensions were approved. These were for contracts A and B. For contracts C and D, they were attempted to be extended in February 2025. The principle is to not extend the contract unless under exceptional circumstances, but in 2025, you asked for an extension of the contracts again. despite knowing the principle. In different sectors for internal controls, often people would have to refer to the specific standard practices, and there will be internal audits and spot checks would be done to see whether requirements 1 to 5 are met. Since you already know of such instances, you should have specific procedures, but you made the same mistake again. How can people be confident in your performance that something like this won't happen again? And with the spot checks, you are following procedures as well. Thank you. Director. Thank you, Chair. First of all, we agree with the Audit Commission's recommendations. In terms of internal work on tendering, we need to be tighter. We can, of course, improve on how we dealt with the contracts. But let me explain. At the time, with food waste recycling, we want to reduce the prices. So for other arrangements or requirements, such as transportation, we want to lower the prices as much as possible. In consideration, it took more time, which is why we needed to extend the previous contracts. To prevent this from recurring, we have enhanced the internal review procedures. We now have a mechanism that internally we will make preparations in advance with reference to the end of the previous contracts and prepare relevant tendering documents to prevent contract extensions. We also escalate this issue to the deputy director level to make sure we won't have delays like this again. Alright, I want to ask about paragraph 2.40 because it is a related issue. The director said there is now an enhanced system to monitor the progress of tendering of procurement contracts and will consider making use of AI tools for follow-up. Do you have specific examples for members' reference? Can you tell us more about the progress of implementation of the enhanced system? Can you talk about specifically in operation what measures you have implemented? Mr. Kenneth Ching, Deputy Director. Thank you. As the director said, we did note the instances. It is not ideal to have contract extensions. So we now have a stringent monitoring system. Every month or every 2 months, I don't really remember, but regularly officers would have a comprehensive review of existing contracts, and relevant teams would make a judgment to see if they're making good progress, when the next tendering will take place, would they have any expectations of something causing a delay in tendering, and if they know potential issues, they would do something now to prevent that from happening. And as the director said earlier, this is now escalated to the level of deputy director. So if we expect red flags, we will deal with them early on so as not to affect tendering of future contracts. I think it is very important to have internal monitoring. If there are no precedents, then of course you may not be alerted to the issue. But if you have precedents, you know this is a systematic issue that occurs recurrently. So you need to make sure internally you attach enough importance to the issue to make sure this is completed in time. Thank you. I have no other follow-up questions for this part. Professor Alex Fan. Thank you, Chair. I want to follow up on what Mr. Robert Lee asked about contract extensions. The departmental representative said every month they have regular monitoring to identify any potential issues that may lead to contractual extension. I note that there is a deadline. So for contracts A, B, C, and D, there was extension of contracts. I want to ask, after contracts A to D, if we still saw contract extensions. Perhaps you can answer this question first. Well, after contracts A, B, C, and D, we now have a timeline. There was no longer the need to extend other contracts. So we do not see a recurrence of the issue, right? Because we have stringent reviews to see how many contracts will expire in a given time frame, and the relevant officers took effective action to resolve any potential issues. All right, I have a follow-up question. Internally, would you have a work plan, say how many months before the expiry of a contract, the procedures for tendering of follow-on agreements would be activated? Because many members asked about how we could instill confidence in the public that this wouldn't happen again. Deputy Director, thank you, Chair. Let me correct something. I said every month or every 2 months a report would be made on when the contracts that are about to expire are, and I would like to correct myself, it's every quarter. And right now this mechanism would be activated a year before the contract ends. Thank you. You have no other questions? None. I will ask some questions myself then. Let's go back to the audit report. Which page is it? Excuse me. Please wait a moment. If we look at the report, paragraph 2.23 and 2.24, from what I can see, the reports were completed late. It took quite a long time to complete the reports as well. I observed in the workflow there were multiple areas that saw delays. So I want to ask, how often would we have refused to see something was submitted late? Will we have weekly reviews or some other periods? And if the issue is identified, is there some sort of escalation mechanism? Perhaps the level of deputy director or director or even the secretary. to identify the issues and to resolve such issues. If there is such mechanism or not, and if there is, what will you do? Thank you, Chair. The contractor's performance reports were completed late, as said earlier, because officers were quite busy when we saw rapid expansion of the food waste recycling arrangements. This is, of course, not ideal, and we have a system to remind early on officers have to complete such reports. And if they're late for a certain date or by a certain number of days, or when it's about time to submit the reports, the relevant officers, supervisors would have to make sure they follow up with the officers, telling them that they have to submit their reports perhaps next week. And any late submissions should be reported and escalated.
Any other questions? I think Mr. Lang's concerning Mr. Lang's question. Any more follow up? If not, okay. Now it's 10:40. We can take a break now, and then we go to session 3 and 4. Let's have a 10 to 15 minute break. 15-minute break. Thank you.